In the complex theater of the Russo-Ukrainian War, recent developments have illuminated the profound miscalculations of the Washington administration regarding the dynamics of this ongoing conflict. As the war enters its 11th year, the geopolitical repercussions of the U.S. response to Russia's aggression are becoming increasingly evident, raising questions about the effectiveness of American diplomacy in achieving a resolution. Historically, the Kremlin's approach to Ukraine has been marked by a preference for subversion over outright military aggression. When Russia annexed Crimea in 2014, the strategy was not to occupy but to destabilize through covert operations and hybrid warfare. This method served to undermine Ukraine's sovereignty while presenting a facade of peaceful intentions, a narrative many in Europe were willing to believe. However, as the conflict has evolved, particularly with the escalation of a full-scale invasion in 2022, it has become clear that Russian President Vladimir Putin's regime has increasingly relied on militarized nationalism and an economy geared towards war with less room for diplomatic compromise. The shift in perception over the years has been stark. European leaders have gradually awakened to the reality that Putin's proclamations of peace are mere rhetoric. Yet the new U.S. administration under President Trump has adopted an approach that some analysts describe as politically naive and morally indifferent. The first 4 months of this administration have seen a series of diplomatic missteps culminating in a lack of tangible progress in the ongoing negotiations between Washington, Moscow, and Kiev. Following a recent phone call between Trump and Putin, both leaders spoke of a successful dialogue. But the absence of substantial results has left many observers skeptical. Putin's recent comments indicate that he does not foresee a ceasefire in the near future, stating that any potential truce would be temporary and contingent on appropriate agreements. This acknowledgement reflects the entrenched position of the Russian military, which has mobilized vast resources and personnel, making a sudden withdrawal or cessation of hostilities improbable. The Kremlin continues to propagate narratives that demonize Ukraine, framing its military as riddled with neo-Nazi elements, all while preparing the Russian populace for a rejection of any peace initiatives. In parallel, military assessments reveal that Russia's ambitions extend beyond the territories it currently occupies. Recent meetings with officials from Kursk Oblast suggest that Russia is contemplating further territorial claims, particularly in the strategically significant Sumy Oblast. This ambition is not merely about land acquisition but is part of a broader strategy to solidify Russia's influence in the region and undermine Ukraine's sovereignty. The international response, particularly from the U.S., has also been telling. Secretary of State Marco Rubio recently emphasized the need for Russia to present its terms for a ceasefire, indicating a willingness to negotiate. However, Lavrov's outright dismissal of American proposals for a ceasefire before negotiations signifies Russia's intent to maintain its aggressive posture indefinitely. This refusal to negotiate in good faith underscores the futility of attempts to mediate without a significant shift in the balance of power on the ground. As the situation continues to evolve, the implications for both Ukraine and the broader European security environment are profound. The ongoing war is reshaping alliances and prompting a re-evaluation of military strategies across the continent. Ukraine's formation of specialized military units such as motorcycle assault regiments showcases its adaptive response to the changing dynamics of warfare, emphasizing agility and innovation in the face of adversity. Looking ahead, it is increasingly clear that the resolution of the Russo-Ukrainian War will not come through negotiations alone. Historical precedents suggest that only a significant military failure for Russia could lead to a re-evaluation of its imperial ambitions and a potential path toward peace. Without a fundamental change in Russian military fortunes, the conflict is likely to persist, perpetuating instability not only within Ukraine but across the region. As the international community watches closely, the need for a coherent and robust response to Russian aggression remains urgent. Underscoring the delicate balance of power in Eastern Europe. In the ongoing conflict between Ukraine and Russia, the situation remains as dynamic as ever, with significant developments emerging from both sides. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky recently announced a staggering figure: over 63,000 Russian casualties in the Kursk region since the onset of hostilities there last August. The Russian army has suffered significant losses, Zelensky stated in his nightly address, asserting that Ukrainian military operations continue unabated despite Russian claims of having expelled Ukrainian forces from the area. This announcement coincides with Russian President Vladimir Putin's surprise visit to Kursk, marking his first trip since Russian forces declared they had regained control of the area. Despite these assertions, Zelensky firmly rejected the Kremlin's claims of a complete Russian victory, emphasizing that fighting persists not only in Kursk but also in Belgorod, further complicating the military landscape. The conflict has seen a notable escalation in drone warfare, with Russia claiming to have faced an unprecedented attack involving over 370 Ukrainian drones, some of which reportedly reached the outskirts of Moscow, forcing temporary closures of airports. Ukrainian forces claimed responsibility for targeting key facilities, including a semiconductor plant in Oryol Oblast, a move that underscores the expanding reach of Ukraine's military capabilities. In the broader context of the war, the Kremlin has expressed intentions to exchange prisoners of war, with Ukraine submitting a list of 1,000 captives to be swapped as part of negotiations that followed the first direct talks between the two nations in over 3 years. These discussions, held in Istanbul earlier this month, represent a rare step towards potential diplomatic engagement amid the ongoing hostilities. Meanwhile, the situation in eastern Ukraine remains exceedingly tense. Ukrainian forces are engaged in fierce battles in Donetsk, where Zelensky noted that the fighting is the most intense along the entire front line. Reports indicate that Russian troops have recently captured the settlement of Novopoltavka, intensifying concerns over territorial control as both sides continue to suffer heavy casualties. Amid these military developments, a public letter from Ukrainian defense manufacturers to President Zelensky has emerged, urging the lifting of export restrictions on domestically produced military equipment, particularly drones. The letter highlights the strategic potential of Ukraine's defense industry, which has seen rapid growth since the onset of the war. It is time to demonstrate that Ukraine is capable of being not only a party that receives international support but also a full-fledged partner that exports security, the letter stated, calling for a reassessment of regulations that currently hinder the global competitiveness of Ukrainian defense products. As the conflict continues to evolve, the international community remains on alert, closely monitoring the shifting dynamics on the battlefield. The resilience of Ukraine's military, coupled with increasing calls for enhanced defense capabilities and potential diplomatic negotiations, suggests that the conflict is far from resolved. With drone warfare becoming a pivotal aspect of military strategy on both sides, the implications for future engagements could redefine the nature of modern warfare in the region. Looking ahead, the interplay between military actions and diplomatic efforts will be crucial in determining the course of this ongoing conflict, as both nations navigate a complex geopolitical landscape rife with uncertainty. In a surprising shift in U.S. foreign policy, President Donald Trump has signaled a withdrawal from the ongoing international efforts to pressure Russia regarding its invasion of Ukraine. Conversations with both European leaders and President Vladimir Putin have led to a new narrative. Trump appears to believe that Ukraine and Russia should resolve their conflict independently without substantial American involvement. This change is raising eyebrows among European officials, who remain committed to imposing additional sanctions on Russia. Sources close to the discussions have revealed that during a recent phone call between Trump and Putin, the U.S. president expressed skepticism about the effectiveness of external pressure on Russia. Instead, he implied that the conditions to end the war will be negotiated between the two parties, effectively leaving Ukraine to fend for itself in the face of continued aggression from Russia. This move comes as a sharp departure from previous statements in which Trump indicated he could broker a swift resolution to the conflict. Critics have noted that this shift aligns with Trump's long-standing inclination to pursue business opportunities with Russia, raising questions about his commitment to supporting Ukraine, a nation that has faced 3 years of brutal invasion. As Bridget A. Brink, the former U.S. ambassador to Ukraine, remarked, the policy since the beginning of the Trump administration has been to put pressure on the victim Ukraine rather than the aggressor Russia. This sentiment reflects a growing concern that Trump's approach may embolden Russian aggression while undermining Ukraine's sovereignty. Trump's recent actions seem to resonate with his broader desire to normalize relations with Russia. In previous social media posts, he suggested that the U.S. could engage in lucrative trade with Russia post-conflict, stating there is a tremendous opportunity for Russia to create massive amounts of jobs and wealth. Its potential is unlimited. Such rhetoric has led many to speculate whether Trump is prioritizing economic considerations over geopolitical stability. In stark contrast, European leaders are firm in their resolve to impose new sanctions on Russia. Following recent drone strikes against Ukrainian cities, Britain announced a new wave of sanctions targeting Russia's military and financial sectors. British Foreign Secretary David Lammy condemned Putin as a warmonger and urged for an immediate ceasefire to facilitate peace talks. Meanwhile, the European Union is preparing to unveil its 17th package of sanctions against Russia, signaling a coordinated effort to maintain pressure on the Kremlin despite the apparent shift in U.S. policy. The implications of Trump's stance are profound. European officials have conveyed a sense of urgency, noting that they cannot rely on the United States to join them in imposing further sanctions. With upcoming summits such as the Group of Seven in June and a NATO summit shortly thereafter, the divergence in strategy between the U.S. and its European allies will likely be a focal point. The NATO summit in particular will address long-term support for Ukraine and strategies to contain Russian aggression, testing the unity of the alliance. As Trump continues to navigate this complex geopolitical landscape, the future of U.S.-Ukraine relations hangs in the balance. The potential for a significant shift in American foreign policy raises critical questions. Will the U.S. abandon its commitment to Ukraine, and what consequences will this have for the broader geopolitical stability in Europe? As the situation unfolds, the world watches closely to see how these developments will reshape the landscape of international diplomacy and security. In a world increasingly defined by moral complexity and political cowardice, the actions of courageous leaders stand in stark contrast to the timidity exhibited by many in power. As the ongoing conflict in Ukraine continues to unfold, President Volodymyr Zelensky has emerged as a symbol of resilience, demonstrating a steadfast commitment to his country and its values. Similarly, Pope Francis has been recognized for his unwavering pursuit of compassion and inclusivity within the Catholic Church. Their examples prompt a pressing question: why do so few leaders exhibit similar courage in the face of adversity? The concept of courage has been articulated through history by figures like Jean Jouars, who famously stated, "Courage is seeking the truth and speaking it." Jouars himself paid the ultimate price for his convictions during the early 20th century, a poignant reminder of the risks that accompany true bravery. Today, the landscape appears littered with instances of moral compromise and self-interest, particularly among political elites. While everyday citizens, like humanitarian workers and protesters, continue to exhibit remarkable bravery. The same cannot be said for many in positions of authority. Zelensky's leadership during the ongoing war in Ukraine exemplifies moral fortitude. His refusal to back down in the face of aggression has galvanized not only his nation but has also inspired global solidarity. In contrast, the actions of various political leaders in the United States reveal a troubling trend of moral cowardice. High-profile examples abound, from the Supreme Court justices who have undermined the rule of law to corporate executives who prioritize profit over principles. As Alexander Hurst articulates, the phenomenon of political cowardice is alarming, with many leaders opting for expediency over integrity, often at the expense of their constituents' welfare. The recent decision by Harvard University to oppose the demands of the Trump administration illustrates a moment of moral clarity amidst a sea of complicity. While commendable, this decision serves as a reminder of how infrequently institutions of power take principled stands. The question remains whether elite universities like Harvard are adequately instilling values of integrity and social responsibility in their students. A recent report highlighted that a significant number of graduates prioritize financial success over the development of a meaningful life philosophy, suggesting a troubling trend where material gain overshadows ethical considerations. As Hearst notes, the breakdown of societal engagement with morality in public life is alarming. The focus on wealth accumulation and political maneuvering has created a disconnect between leaders and the very people they are meant to serve. This erosion of values fosters an environment where hypocrisy is normalized and the moral implications of decisions are relegated to the background. The media's role in shaping public discourse further complicates this landscape, as coverage often emphasizes electoral implications over the ethical dimensions of policies and actions taken by leaders. In light of these observations, the need for a recalibration of values in leadership becomes apparent. Society must demand more from its leaders, an adherence to principles that prioritize the common good over individual gain. As the world watches the developments in Ukraine, the actions of Zelensky serve as a reminder that courage and leadership can inspire hope and change. However, it also underscores the responsibility of individuals and institutions to foster a culture of integrity and accountability. Looking ahead, the challenge lies not only in identifying courageous leaders but also in cultivating a society that values and supports moral clarity. As we reflect on the current state of leadership and the principles that guide it, the future will hinge on our collective ability to demand integrity, honor, and courage from those in power. The examples set by Zelensky and Pope Francis should serve as a clarion call for a renewed commitment to ethical leadership in an increasingly complex world.